Don't save that cripple. That was the text message I received from my mother. Not an enemy, not a stranger, but my own mother, as my sister lay beaten and bleeding on my doorstep at 2 in the morning. I've been trained to fight enemies my whole adult life, but what do you do when the person trying to kill your family is the one who gave you life? My name is Alina. I'm a soldier trained to face the worst in people, but nothing, absolutely nothing prepared me for this. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say, listening in the comments, or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reached. Don't forget to subscribe and join me on this journey, where the unspoken feelings of the past finally find their voice. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. This story is my promise that the silence is over. The truth has to have a voice. Thank you for listening. And now, here's my story. It started with that pounding on my door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was frantic, desperate. I pulled on a hoodie and opened it just enough to see my sister Jenna swaying on her feet, her face a mess of bruises, one eye swollen shut. She was clutching her 8-year-old daughter Maya, who was strapped into her wheelchair, her knuckles white from gripping the armrests. Jenna's knees buckled, and she collapsed against me. I had to drag her inside while maneuvering Maya's wheelchair through the frame. I got them in, kicked the door shut, and saw the torn shirt the way she winced and protected her side. You didn't need to be a medic to see the damage. That's when my phone buzzed. And that's when I saw the message from Mom. Don't save that cripple. Followed by a second text. She's a traitor. I stared at the words, the cold fury rising in my throat. Sharon Vance, the woman who raised us on the mantra of family, first had just left her own daughter and disabled granddaughter for dead. I put the phone face down. You're safe now, I told Jenna, my voice tight. I eased her onto the couch. Her breathing was shallow. Maya sat frozen in her chair, clutching an old silver necklace from our grandmother. I knelt down. Maya, are you hurt? She just shook her head, her eyes huge with terror. Jenna's voice was a weak whisper. Don't call Mom. Wouldn't dream of it. I said the words like ice. I grabbed the first aid kit from under my sink, a habit from my job, and began cutting away the torn fabric around a nasty purple bruise blooming over her ribs. This needs a doctor, I stated. Please, don't send me back, she begged. Back where? The question hung in the air. She just closed her eyes. I looked at Maya at her old cheap wheelchair with a brake that barely looked functional. That was it. No more questions. No more waiting for permission. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Cumberland County Emergency. What's your emergency? My sister is at my apartment. I said, my voice steady and cold. She's been badly assaulted. I'm reporting a domestic violence case. The dispatcher kept me on the line asking questions. Jenna's one good eye opened. You don't know the whole story? She whispered. Then you'd better start talking, I told her. Help was on the way. But as I looked at my sister and my niece huddled and broken in my living room, I knew this was just the beginning. A firm official knock came at the door. Paramedics. I let them in, and they immediately got to work on Jenna. A police officer with them looked at me. Do you know who assaulted her? I glanced at Jenna. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. Not yet, I said. They had to bring a stretcher for her. I knelt by Maya. They're going to help your mom. She just nodded, her death grip on the necklace, the only thing that seemed real to her. We followed them to the ambulance. The humid night air felt suffocating. I locked Maya's wheelchair in place beside Jenna's stretcher and climbed in. The officer joined us. As the doors closed and the lights started flashing, the small space felt like a cage filled with pain and secrets. Maya's small voice cut through the tension. "Grandma was there!" I snapped my head toward her. "When tonight?" she said, her voice trembling. "She told me not to talk." "About Trevor." Jenna's hand twitched. The officer immediately picked up on the name. "Is Trevor the suspect? Don't tell them yet," Jenna pleaded from under her oxygen mask. I leaned in close, my patience gone. "Keeping quiet is what got you here, Jenna. You think it's going to make this better." She looked away. The paramedic said her blood pressure was low, a sign of internal bleeding. Maya started to cry silently. "He said he'd take me away," she whispered. "Said Mom couldn't stop him." That was it. That was the spark that lit the fuse. At the hospital, in the blinding light of the ER, I flashed my military ID out of habit. "I'm her sister." They moved Jenna behind a curtain. The officer stepped out to make calls. I sat with Maya trying to piece it together. "What did Grandma say?" I asked her softly. Maya's whisper was devastating. She said Mom deserved it, and that I'd get to live somewhere better. The rage I felt was so cold it burned. This wasn't just abuse from a violent husband. This was a conspiracy orchestrated by our own mother. The doctor came in confirming my worst fears: cracked ribs, blunt force trauma. Someone beat her badly and repeatedly. And my mother watched. Maybe she even encouraged it. Jenna still refused to file a report. She was terrified. My phone buzzed again. "Mom, don't get involved, Alina. You'll regret it." I didn't just get involved. I became a one-woman army. As soon as the nurse left, I was at Jenna's bedside. "Talk. Now." The story finally spilled out. Trevor taking Maya's disability checks, the fights, and our mother's role in it all. "She knows he spends it on himself," Jenna cried. "She tells me I should be grateful he stays. Last night I told him I wanted Maya's money in a separate account." He laughed. "Mom was right there. She just watched him shove me into the counter." I felt something snap. "And what did she do?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "She told me to stop making a scene," Jenna whispered. "When I tried to leave with Maya, she stood in the door and blocked our way. She told me if I left, I was on my own. No family, no money, nothing. And she still had the nerve to text me to leave you on the damn doorstep." "I didn't think you'd answer," she sobbed. "Well, you thought wrong," I said, my voice dropping. "Where is he now? I don't know. At Mom's, probably, or out drinking. He always disappears after—" Her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish. I knew exactly what kind of night it had been, and I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. I sat back, the anger settling into something colder, more precise. This wasn't just about him. Mom was part of it, enabling him, maybe even benefiting. "Jenna, do you have any proof of what he's been doing with the money?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Bank statements. They're in a folder in my closet, but the account's in his name with Mom as a co-signer. My name's not on it. I only see the deposits because the VA still sends me letters." That was enough to start a paper trail. I didn't need to touch the account to start pulling records. Not if she gave me authorization. "You're going to give me permission to access whatever you can," I told her. "We're not playing nice about this. Not anymore. The officer came back in glancing at his notepad. Any updates, he asked me. Working on it, I said, which was technically true. He gave Jenna a polite smile. When you're ready, we'll take your statement. You can also request a victim's advocate. She nodded faintly. After he left, I pulled my phone out and started typing a note, names, dates, everything Jenna had just told me. If I was going to build a case, it needed to be airtight. Military police training wasn't just for chasing soldiers who went AWOL. It made you good at building timelines, linking evidence, and keeping emotions out of the paperwork. Jenna shifted on the bed, wincing. You can't let this mess up your job, Alina. I looked her straight in the eye. My job is protecting people. That doesn't stop at the gate. Her shoulders eased just a fraction. Maya reached over and took her mom's hand, the necklace still dangling from her other fist. I glanced at the clock. It was pushing 3:30 a.m., but my brain was wide awake. Trevor and Sharon had crossed a line, and I wasn't the type to let that slide. I leaned back in the chair, already planning my next step, and kept my voice steady when I spoke again. We're going to make sure this never happens to you or Maya again. The hallway outside the ER smelled like burnt coffee and antiseptic. As I stepped out to make a call, I dialed a number I knew by heart. Staff Sergeant Evans over at CID. It was late, but Evans was a night owl, the kind of guy who answered on the first ring. Ramsey, you on duty. Not officially, I said, but I've got a situation. Domestic violence, possible financial exploitation tied to VA benefits. Victims, my sister. Suspects are her husband and our mother. There was a pause. That's messy. Yeah. I need to know how much I can dig without crossing into unauthorized access. Evans sighed. You know the drill. If she signs a release, you can gather her personal financial records. But anything tied to his VA claim, that's federal. Get it the wrong way, and you're the one in hot water. Got it. Thanks. I hung up and went back inside. Jenna was propped up a little higher now, looking more awake. I pulled a folded form from my bag, a standard power of attorney template I kept for emergencies. Sign this. It lets me act on your behalf for banking and benefits inquiries. I'll make copies for the court later. She hesitated. Is this really going to help? It's going to start a trail they can't erase. I said. She signed, her handwriting shaky but legible. I took a photo of the form immediately, just in case. Sitting at a small table in the corner, I opened my laptop. The hospital Wi-Fi was slow, but it worked. Using the routing number from Jenna's most recent benefit letter, I traced it through public records and cross-referenced it with bank location codes. The account was in both Trevor Stone and Sharon Vance's names. Scrolling through linked transactions, I hit a list of merchant codes that made my teeth clench. Las Vegas Resort charges a Florida condo deposit, high-end sporting goods stores. Not a single payment to anything that might help Maya. I turned the screen so Jenna could see. This is where Maya's money went. Her lips pressed together, hard eyes filling but not spilling over. Maya was quiet, but she'd rolled her chair closer. She looked at the screen and then at me. Grandma said it was for the family. Maya, I said gently, taking your money without permission isn't helping the family. She looked down, fidgeting with the necklace. I saved every screenshot, every traceable number. Then I encrypted the folder and backed it up twice. Years in the service had taught me that you don't keep one copy of anything that matters. Jenna shifted. If they find out you're digging, they'll, I don't know, Trevor can get mean fast. Let him, I said. Mean is easier to handle than clever. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You stick your nose in, you'll lose your stripes. I tilted the screen so Jenna could see. Trevor. She nodded once. I deleted the message, but not before taking a screenshot. Harassment from the suspect. Another piece of the puzzle. A nurse came in to check Jenna's vitals, and I stepped into the hall again. I called Evans back. Got a co-signed account, non-beneficiary spending. Suspect just sent a threatening text. That's enough to raise flags enough to get the VA interested, Evans said. But tread carefully. It's your family. So anything you dig up personally might get challenged. Let a lawyer run point. I already knew which one. Claire Brennan. She chewed up worse cases and spat them out in neat court victories. I made a note to call her in the morning. Back inside, Maya had dozed off in her chair, still holding the necklace. Jenna was watching her like she was afraid to blink. Get some rest, I told her. I'll be here when you wake up. She closed her eyes, but I could tell she wasn't sleeping yet. My mind was already running through what came next. Legal filings, protective orders, securing those bank records before they vanished. One thing was certain. I wasn't letting Sharon and Trevor keep control of anything that belonged to Maya. The sun was just burning through the early haze when I pulled into my assigned parking spot back at the base housing. I'd left Jenna and Maya at the hospital with a security detail I trusted, figuring it was safer to put some distance between them and anyone who might try to finish what was started. I hadn't even gotten my boots off when there was a knock at my door. 2 slow taps, a pause, then 2 more. The kind of rhythm people use when they think you'll open up just because they sound friendly. I checked the peephole. Trevor Stone wearing a clean shirt and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I opened the door just far enough to block him with my shoulder. You're not supposed to be here. He gave a little chuckle. Relax. I'm just here to clear the air. We're all family, right wrong, I said flatly. Trevor leaned on the frame like he owned it. Jenna likes to make me out as the bad guy when she's the one with the problems. I take care of things, Alina. Always have. But she's been running her mouth to you, and I don't appreciate it. I didn't blink. She didn't have to say much. The bruises spoke for her. His smile twitched. You're making a mistake getting involved. You've got a career you care about. Be ashamed if your CEO heard you were misusing your position. I let the silence stretch, then slowly lifted my phone from my pocket and tilted it so the red recording dot was visible. Keep talking, Trevor. That wiped the smirk clean off his face. He stepped back, putting his hands in his pockets. You think you're smart, but you don't get how this works. Sharon's on my side. She's got pull in this town more than you think. Whatever story Jenna's spinning, it's just noise. You let this go, and we all move on. Not happening. His jaw tightened. This isn't over. I watched him turn and head toward the lot, his shoulders stiff. The second he was out of sight, I locked the door and transferred the recording to my encrypted drive. The audio wasn't a confession, but it was intimidation. Good leverage for court and for VA investigators. I poured myself a coffee I didn't really want and sat at the kitchen table listening to the playback. His tone said more than his words. The guy was used to getting his way by pushing people until they folded. That might have worked on Jenna, but I'd been through worse than his cheap threats. A few minutes later, my neighbor Sergeant First Class Hayes stopped by. He'd seen Trevor leaving and asked if everything was okay. I gave him the bare bones version, enough for him to understand there might be trouble without dragging him into it. Hayes nodded, said he'd keep an eye out, and left. I spent the next hour organizing everything I had so far: the screenshots of the bank account, the threatening text, the recording from the doorway. I added timestamps, file names, and short summaries so nothing got lost in the shuffle. Years of writing incident reports had drilled into me that a sloppy file was worse than no file at all. By the time I shut the laptop, I'd made up my mind to head back to the hospital. I wanted to be there when Jenna woke up enough to answer a few more questions. But first, I stopped by the base legal office to grab extra victim statement forms and a few information packets on protective orders. If Jenna was going to do this, she needed to know exactly what her options were. As I walked back out to my truck, I spotted a black SUV idling down the street, tinted windows, engine running. When I turned my head toward it, it pulled away slowly, no plates visible from my angle. My gut said it wasn't a coincidence. I got in, started the engine, and drove toward the hospital without looking back. Whatever game Trevor and Sharon thought they were playing, they just made the mistake of bringing it into my territory. The hospital lobby was buzzing with shift change chatter when I walked in, a stack of legal forms tucked under my arm. I spotted Claire Brennan, leaning against the reception desk, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. She looked like she'd been awake since yesterday, which was probably true. "You called, I came," she said, as soon as she saw me. "And you weren't kidding." I pulled court records on Stone. 2 prior domestic disturbance calls, no charges filed, and your mother, Sharon Vance's name, shows up as a character witness in both. "That tracks," I said, leading her toward Jenna's room. We walked in to find Jenna sitting upright, hair brushed, eyes alert but wary. Maya was beside her bed, watching the morning news on the wall-mounted TV. Claire set her coffee on the counter and introduced herself. "I'm here to protect you and your daughter," she told Jenna. "But I don't work miracles. I work with facts. So I need everything, even the ugly parts." Jenna glanced at me, then back at Claire. "You'll hear it all. But there's something else." She reached over to the side table and picked up an envelope. Inside was a freshly stamped summons, a petition for emergency custody, filed by Trevor Stone. The air in the room went heavy. Claire scanned it quickly. "He's claiming you're unfit. Says you abandoned the marital home, have no income, and can't provide medical care for Maya." "That's all lies," Jenna said, her voice shaking. "Doesn't matter," Claire replied. "What matters is he got it on paper. We have 5 days before the hearing, less if he pushes for an emergency ruling." I pulled the victim statement forms from my bag and set them in front of Jenna. "Fill these out. Every detail you remember about last night and anything else that shows a pattern." Jenna looked overwhelmed, but Claire leaned in. "You do this now, while it's fresh. And Alina, get me the bank evidence you mentioned." I opened my laptop, pulled up the encrypted folder, and slid it over. Claire's eyes moved fast over the screenshots. "This is gold. Not just for custody, but for criminal charges. A judge will have a hard time giving him Maya if we show he's been stealing from her." Jenna's pen scratched across the forms while Claire kept talking strategy. "We'll also file for a temporary protective order today that keeps him from contacting you or Maya directly. If he violates it, he's done." I nodded. Already got a recording of him showing up at my place this morning trying to intimidate me. "Perfect," Claire said. "That goes in too." Maya turned from the television. "Does that mean we don't have to see him anymore?" That's the goal, Claire told her with a small smile. A knock at the door interrupted us. A nurse poked her head in. Captain Ramsey, there's a call for you at the front desk. Someone said it's urgent. I stepped out and picked up the handset. A clipped voice on the other end said, "This is Captain Finch. I need you in my office at 1400 to discuss a complaint filed against you for abuse of authority. Don't be late." I knew without asking who filed it. Understood, sir. When I got back to the room, Claire raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Sharon's playing dirty. Looks that way, I said. Claire didn't look surprised. Then, we hit back harder. I'll get the custody motion filed by noon. You deal with your chain of command, keep it clean, and don't give them anything they can use against you. Jenna handed me the completed forms, her signature, at the bottom of each page. I'm scared, Alina. He's not going to stop. I took them from her carefully. That's why we make sure he doesn't get the chance. Claire gathered her things already on the phone to the courthouse as she walked out. I stood there for a moment, watching Jenna and Maya together, and knew we'd just shifted from defense to offense. By the time I walked into Captain Finch's office, the blinds were drawn, and a thick manila folder sat on his desk. He didn't bother with small talk. Close the door, Ramsey? I did, and stood at parade rest in front of his desk. He opened the folder and slid a typed statement toward me. Your mother, Sharon Vance, alleges you've been using your position in the military police to access civilian financial records without authorization. She claims you're targeting her and her son-in-law out of personal bias. I kept my face neutral. Sir, that's not accurate. I have a signed power of attorney from my sister, the account holder's spouse. Everything I've done is legal and documented. He studied me for a moment. I believe you, but accusations like this don't just disappear because you're right. CID will review it. Meanwhile, keep your investigation within civilian legal channels. No crossing the line. Yes, sir. He leaned back. And Ramsey, family drama has a way of ending careers. Be careful. Dismissed. I headed out into the hallway, my phone buzzing in my pocket. It was a voicemail from Sharon. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but every word was barbed. You've made a fool of yourself, Alina. You think you can protect Jenna. You're going to lose your job, and when you do, she'll have no one. I deleted it without saving. Some things weren't worth keeping. By the time I got back to the hospital, Claire was waiting in the lobby, a folder in her hands. Filed the protective order. Judge set an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. Good, I said, because Trevor's not backing off. Claire's expression sharpened. What happened? He's got Sharon running interference. Filed a complaint with my CO trying to tie my hands. She smirked. If they're scared enough to hit you from 2 angles, it means you've got them cornered. We headed upstairs. Jenna was asleep, but Maya was awake, playing a quiet game on a tablet. I knelt beside her. You doing okay? She nodded. Mom said we might have to go to court. That's right, I said. And when we do, you won't have to say anything unless you want to. That's for the grown-ups to handle. Claire and I stepped into the hallway to talk. I've been digging, she said. Trevor's VA benefits paperwork doesn't match his service record. He's claiming a disability rating for an injury that never happened. If we can get the VA Office of Inspector General on this, he's looking at more than losing custody. That's going to take time, I said. Then we start now. I called Evans again, gave him the basics without crossing into classified info. He promised to flag it for OIG review. When I hung up, Claire handed me a copy of the custody petition. Read this. Every lie, every exaggeration, they'll throw it at the judge tomorrow. We counter with the bank records, the protective order, and your recording of him threatening you. I scanned the petition. Trevor had painted Jenna as unstable, financially irresponsible, and neglectful of Maya's medical needs. It was so far from the truth. It would have been funny if it wasn't so dangerous. Jenna stirred and opened her eyes. Was someone talking about Trevor always? I said. But right now, we're focused on making sure tomorrow goes in your favor. Her voice was soft. I can't lose Maya. You won't, I said. Not while I'm breathing. We spent the next hour going over her statement, tightening the timeline, making sure every incident had a date, a place, and, if possible, a witness. Maya's teacher could testify to bruises she'd noticed, and a neighbor had seen Trevor yelling in the yard more than once. By the time we were done, Claire had enough to make a judge think twice about anything Trevor said. I printed an extra copy for Jenna to review overnight. Outside, the evening light was fading, and I could feel the weight of the next day settling in. The fight wasn't just about proving Jenna's side. It was about making sure Trevor and Sharon couldn't twist the system to punish her for leaving. I knew they'd come hard tomorrow. I planned to come harder. Morning came too early, and the courthouse smelled faintly of burnt coffee and floor polish. Claire and I sat at the plaintiff's table, stacks of labeled folders in front of us. Across the aisle, Trevor sat in a suit that looked one size too big, arms folded like he was waiting for a trophy. Sharon was right next to him, wearing a pastel blazer and an expression so self-satisfied it could have been painted on. Jenna sat between me and Claire, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Maya was in a separate room with a child advocate, coloring, while the adults sorted out her future. The judge, a silver-haired man with sharp glasses, took his seat. This is an emergency hearing on custody and protective orders in Stone versus Stone. Trevor's attorney started first painting Jenna as an unstable mother who had abandoned the marital home and left Maya in emotional turmoil. Every sentence was dressed up to sound like fact, but felt like theater. Claire didn't even look rattled. When it was her turn, she stood and spoke in the calm, deliberate tone of someone who had dismantled cases like this 100 times. Your Honor, my client did leave the marital home, but only after being physically assaulted in front of her disabled child. We have medical reports, photographs, and sworn statements to that effect. She slid a set of photos to the bailiff, who passed them to the bench. The judge's eyebrows twitched as he flipped through the images of Jenna's bruises. Claire continued. We also have documentation showing Mr. Stone and Ms. Vance. She tilted her head toward Sharon, co-managing an account into which Maya's VA-derived benefits are deposited. Funds from this account have been spent on vacations, personal purchases, and luxury items not on Maya's care. Sharon shifted in her seat, but didn't look at me. Trevor smirked, but it looked more forced now. The judge leaned forward. Do you have evidence of this spending? Yes, Your Honor. Claire passed over the bank statements I'd compiled. Every questionable transaction was highlighted. These are supported by screenshots and transaction codes, all obtained with my client's authorization. Trevor's attorney tried to object, claiming privacy violations, but Claire cut in. The account is co-owned with my client's mother, who is here in court, and the funds originate from benefits granted to my client for her child's care. We are entitled to show how they've been misused. The judge nodded slowly. Overruled. Proceed. Claire pulled her final card. And finally, Your Honor, we submit an audio recording from yesterday morning in which Mr. Stone approached Captain Ramsey's residence and attempted to intimidate her into dropping this matter. We played the clip. Trevor's voice filled the courtroom. You're making a mistake getting involved. You've got a career you care about. Be ashamed if your CO heard you were misusing your position. When the recording ended, the room was silent. The judge scribbled in his notes. Ms. Vance, he said to Sharon, do you have a response to these allegations? Sharon clasped her hands, her voice dripping with false concern. Your Honor, my daughter has always been dramatic. She's twisting family disagreements into what you've just heard. I've only ever acted in Maya's best interests. It was a good performance for anyone who didn't know her. The judge simply said, I'll take that under advisement. When both sides had finished, the judge announced he'd review everything and issue a temporary ruling within the day. But he didn't leave us wondering about one thing. Until that ruling, the existing temporary protective order remains in full effect. Mr. Stone, you are to have no contact with your wife or child. Trevor's jaw flexed. Patricia leaned in to whisper something to him, but I didn't care what it was. Outside the courtroom, Jenna let out a shaky breath. I didn't think he'd keep the order in place. Claire closed her folder. We're just getting started. I walked them toward the parking lot, scanning the sidewalk out of habit. We had barely made it halfway to my truck when my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I answered without thinking. A man's voice, low and deliberate, said, Drop it, Captain, or the Army's gonna think you've gone rogue. Then the line went dead. Claire caught the look on my face. That didn't sound like a wrong number. It wasn't, I said, sliding the phone into my pocket. That's twice in 2 days. Jenna glanced over her shoulder. I got her and Maya into my truck, locked the doors, and drove them straight back to the hospital. Claire followed in her own car. Upstairs, I found a quiet corner and sent the call log to Evans at CD with a short message, possible harassment, unknown male, likely tied to VA fraud suspects. His reply came fast. Careful. We're seeing red flags on Stone's VA file. Don't discuss details over this line. When I got back to Jenna's room, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, pale but alert. Mom called me, she said. She told me if I kept embarrassing the family, she'd make sure Maya ended up in foster care. That set my teeth on edge. She doesn't have the power to do that. Jenna's eyes dropped. She says she knows. People at Child Protective Services said all it takes is one complaint about my mental stability. I didn't doubt Sharon had friends in low places. I also knew the best way to kill a threat like that was with documentation. Write it down, I told her. Every word, she said. Date, time, and her number from your caller ID. Claire came in, then flipping through her phone. You'll want to hear this. The VA investigator I contacted says Trevor's claim file is a mess. He's reporting an injury from a deployment he never went on. If that's true, it's federal fraud. Jenna looked stunned. How could he even? Because he knows how to work the system, Claire said. And probably because Sharon's been helping him. I pulled my laptop over and started building a timeline. The benefit deposits, the luxury spending, the domestic violence, the court filings, and now the harassment. Laying it out made the picture sharper. This wasn't just family drama. It was a coordinated pattern of financial and emotional abuse. Maya rolled her wheelchair closer. Is Grandma going to get in trouble too? I didn't sugarcoat it. If she's been helping Trevor steal from you? Yes. Maya thought about that for a second, then nodded like she was okay with it. Claire's phone rang. She stepped into the hallway, and when she came back, her expression was tight. That was the VA. They're opening a formal investigation. They'll need both of you to give statements. Jenna's voice was barely a whisper. Will that put him in jail if the evidence is solid? It could, Claire said. The tension in the room was heavy, but I could feel something shifting. For the first time, Trevor and Sharon weren't the only ones pulling the strings. I have to stop by the legal office before they close, I said. Claire, can you stay with them? Of course, she said. On my way out, my phone buzzed again. This time a text from an unfamiliar email address. You're not untouchable. Remember that. I screenshotted it and sent it straight to Evans. His reply: lock your doors tonight. By the time I reached my truck, the air had cooled. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, looking at the hospital entrance in the rearview mirror. If Sharon and Trevor thought intimidation would slow me down, they hadn't been paying attention. The line between protecting my family and going to war had officially vanished. The next morning started with a knock on my office door at the MP station. Sergeant Ortiz stepped in, holding a printed memo. Captain, you've been called to testify in an Article 32 hearing. Name on the docket, Trevor Stone. I skimmed the header. It was a preliminary hearing to determine whether the VA fraud charges and intimidation complaint warranted a court-martial or federal referral. CID's moving fast, Ortiz said. Good, I replied, tucking the memo into my folder. By 0900, I was in a small hearing room on base. The military prosecutor laid out the basics. Trevor's fraudulent injury claim, the commingling of Maya's benefits, and the intimidation attempts against a serving officer, me. Trevor sat at the defense table in his dress uniform, looking like the world's most reluctant soldier. Sharon wasn't there, but her influence hovered like smoke. When it was my turn, I kept my testimony tight. How Jenna had signed the power of attorney, the records I'd gathered legally, and the harassment I'd received. The defense attorney tried to rattle me, suggesting I'd use my position to dig deeper than allowed. I didn't take the bait. Everything I provided was obtained with my sister's explicit consent and through civilian accessible channels. CID's lead investigator followed, presenting evidence from the VA's own files, deployment records that didn't match Trevor's claims, and medical documentation clearly fabricated. It wasn't just sloppy. It was brazen. By the time the hearing adjourned, the presiding officer had more than enough to send the fraud charge up the chain. Trevor avoided eye contact as we filed out. Outside, Evans caught up with me. That went well. But keep your guard up. He's cornered. And cornered people swing wild. I'm ready for it, I said. Back at the hospital, Jenna was propped up in bed, looking stronger. Claire said you were in court again, she asked. Not exactly court. A hearing on base. Trevor's VA fraud is now officially under investigation. She blinked, processing. Does that mean? It means he's got more problems than just custody. Maya wheeled over, holding a piece of paper. I made a list for you. All the times Grandma was mean to Mom, in case it helps. I took it from her dates, short descriptions, even little stick figure drawings. It wasn't formal evidence, but it painted a clear picture. I slipped it into my folder. It helps a lot. Claire came in a few minutes later, phone in hand. The state court just gave us a date for the next custody hearing. 2 weeks. And I've got a witness willing to testify. They saw Sharon cashing benefit checks and handing cash to Trevor. Jenna's eyes widened. "Who your old neighbor, Mrs. Gable," Claire said. "She's tired of watching them get away with it." That was a win. But there was still the matter of Sharon's complaint to my CO. I had a scheduled sit-down with Captain Finch later that afternoon to submit my formal response. I already had a neat packet ready, Jenna's signed consent timestamps on every data pull, and a sworn statement from Claire confirming she directed most of the collection. Before I left the hospital, Jenna caught my hand. "Be careful, Alina. You're fighting them on too many fronts." "I'm not the one who should be worried," I said. At Finch's office, I laid out the packet. He read the top page, then glanced at me. "You've covered yourself well. I'll forward this to JAG for review, but as far as I'm concerned, you've stayed in bounds." That was one less weight on my back. Walking out, I felt the shift, like the pieces were finally aligning. Trevor was boxed in by both military and civilian law. Sharon was exposed as an accomplice. And Jenna was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could win. Now all that was left was to make sure they didn't find a way to twist the knife before we closed the case. The courthouse hallway was already echoing with footsteps when we arrived for the next custody session. Jenna walked between me and Claire, clutching a slim binder. Maya stayed home with a trusted family friend. There was no reason for her to be in the middle of this. Inside the courtroom, Trevor sat alone at the defendant's table. No Sharon today. Her absence was more telling than her presence. His attorney whispered in his ear, but Trevor's eyes kept darting toward us. The judge called the session to order, and Claire wasted no time. "Your Honor, we have new testimony from a direct witness to financial misconduct involving the child's benefits." The bailiff opened the side door and in walked Mrs. Gable, Jenna's former neighbor. She was a small, no-nonsense woman with a handbag that looked like it could double as a blunt weapon. She took the stand, swore in, and began. "I've lived next door to Sharon Vance for 7 years. I've seen her pick up benefit checks meant for Jenna's daughter and hand cash to Mr. Stone more times than I can count. I asked her once why she was doing it. She told me, quote, 'It's better in my hands than in Jenna's.'" Trevor's attorney jumped up to object, but the judge overruled. "Continue." Mrs. Gable didn't flinch. "I also saw them bring home expensive items, flat-screen TVs, new golf clubs, trips out of town, all while Jenna was scraping by." Claire let that sit for a moment, then handed the judge the annotated bank records linking each purchase to dates Mrs. Gable had mentioned. "Your Honor, this shows a consistent pattern of misappropriating funds intended for Maya's care." The judge flipped through the pages. "Mr. Stone, do you wish to respond?" Trevor shifted, then said, "I didn't handle the money. Sharon did. If there's a problem, it's on her." It was the crack we'd been waiting for. Claire pounced. "So you're saying your mother-in-law handled Maya's benefits? Because that contradicts your sworn statement from last month, where you claimed you managed all household finances yourself." Trevor froze, realizing too late he'd just undercut his own testimony. The judge made a note. Claire then introduced the timeline I'd built, laying out incidents of abuse, the threats, and the financial exploitation in chronological order. Seeing it all lined up turned the scattered events into a clear narrative of control and harm. Jenna's voice was steady when she was called to the stand. I left because Trevor hit me in front of my daughter, because my mother told me I was overreacting, and because they were stealing from Maya. I didn't abandon my home. I escaped it. When she stepped down, I saw a flicker of something in Trevor's face, not remorse, but the realization that the walls were closing in. The judge leaned back. Given the evidence and testimony, I'm granting temporary full custody to Mrs. Stone, with no visitation rights for Mr. Stone until further review. All benefit funds are to be redirected to an account managed solely by Mrs. Stone. Any interference will be met with sanctions. It wasn't the final ruling, but it was the strongest interim order we could have hoped for. As we left the courtroom, Jenna exhaled a breath she'd been holding for weeks. I didn't think it would happen this fast. Claire gave a small smile. That's what happens when the trap shuts clean. In the hallway, I caught sight of Trevor watching us go, his expression hard but hollow. Whatever power he thought he had, it was slipping fast, and he knew it. The final custody hearing landed on a rainy Thursday. Jenna walked in beside me, her binder thicker now. Claire trailed us, calm and sharp as ever. Trevor was already seated this time, with Sharon at his side. She'd chosen a conservative navy dress, the picture of maternal respectability, if you didn't know her. The judge wasted no time. Trevor's attorney leaned hard on the narrative that Jenna was unstable and financially incapable. It sounded rehearsed and hollow. When it was Claire's turn, she didn't rush. She started with the medical records, moved to the photographic evidence, then to the benefit misuse with exact dollar amounts. Finally, she held up the transcript from the VA investigation, confirming that Trevor's disability claim was fabricated and under federal review. And most importantly, she said, "We have an audio recording where Mr. Stone attempts to intimidate my client's sister, Captain Alina Ramsey, into dropping this case. That is not the behavior of a man prioritizing his child's well-being." The judge listened. Then Claire added, "Your Honor, this is not simply a divorce. It is a case of domestic abuse, financial exploitation, and coordinated attempts to obstruct justice. Allowing Mr. Stone or Ms. Vance unsupervised access to Maya would put her at risk." Sharon's shifted lips pressed tight. When the judge asked if she wanted to testify, she declined. Jenna took the stand one last time, her voice steady. "I want my daughter to grow up safe, knowing she doesn't have to be afraid of the people who are supposed to protect her. That's all I'm asking for." When she stepped down, the judge folded his hands. "I've reviewed the evidence. Effective immediately, Mrs. Stone is granted full physical and legal custody of Maya Stone. Mr. Stone's visitation is revoked until further order of the court. Ms. Vance's contact with the child is limited to supervised visitation in a state-approved facility. Additionally, any benefits derived from the child's condition will be administered solely by Mrs. Stone. The misuse of said benefits is referred to the appropriate federal authorities." The gavel hit the block sharp and final. Trevor's face went slack. Sharon didn't look at him. She kept her eyes forward as if distance might save her. Jenna gripped my hand, tears welling, but not falling. "It's over," she whispered. Claire began packing her files. One chapter is, now we make sure the enforcement sticks. As we walked out, reporters who'd caught wind of the VA fraud swarmed the steps. Claire fielded them while I guided Jenna through the crowd. Rain dotted her hair, and for the first time in months, she didn't look over her shoulder. Across the street, a black SUV idled, the same type I'd seen before. This time, I didn't feel the knot in my stomach. They could watch all they wanted. There was nothing left for them to take. Jenna squeezed my arm as we reached the curb. Thank you, Alina, for not letting them win. They were never going to, I said, and meant it. We stepped off the courthouse steps into the wet pavement. Jenna stopped long enough to pull Maya's silver chain from her pocket, the one she'd worn the night she showed up at my door. She pressed it into my palm. You kept us safe. I want you to have this. I closed my fingers around the warm metal. I'm not taking it from you. It's not about taking, she said. It's about remembering what you did for us. Before I could respond, Claire joined us, phone in hand. OIG just confirmed Trevor's losing his benefits. Fraud is on the table, and they're kicking it to the U.S. Attorney's Office for possible charges. Jenna let out a breath like she'd been holding it for years. So he can't touch Maya or the money anymore. Not legally, Claire said. And with the protective orders, if he even tries, he's in violation. We walked toward my truck. I kept my eyes moving, but there was no sign of Trevor or Sharon. They'd lost the big play. Now, it was just cleanup. Back at Jenna's temporary apartment, Maya barreled to the door as soon as we walked in. She'd been with Mrs. Gable, who had baked cookies and made the place smell like a safe house. Maya grinned up at Jenna. Did we win? Jenna knelt, hugging her tight. Yeah, baby, we won. Maya looked at me. Next. Does this mean Grandma can't yell at us anymore? That's exactly what it means, I told her. Over the next couple of days, the pace finally slowed. Claire wrapped up the custody paperwork, and CID updated me that Trevor was now under both military and civilian investigation. Sharon had been contacted by federal agents. No charges yet, but the door was open. One evening, Jenna came into the kitchen where I was making coffee. I'm starting to feel like I can breathe again, she said. Like Maya and I actually have a future that's ours. That's the point, I replied. Safety first, everything else after. She leaned on the counter. What about you? You've been in this fight as much as I have. Doesn't it wear you down? Sure, I said honestly, but I've been in tougher spots. This one mattered more because it's family. Later that week, CID closed out their inquiry from Sharon's complaint. Captain Finch called me into his office. Jag found no misconduct, he said. You're clear. It was like a weight I'd forgotten I was carrying finally slid off my shoulders. On the way home, I stopped by Jenna's. Maya was on the couch working on a jigsaw puzzle. She glanced up. Are you still going to be around? Even if you have to go back to the army always, I told her. Just maybe not every day in person. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her puzzle. That night, as I drove back to my own place, the rain had stopped. The streets were still wet, reflecting the streetlights like thin gold ribbons. It hit me. Then this wasn't just about winning in court or beating Trevor at his own game. It was about making sure Jenna and Maya could live without fear, and knowing that I'd done my job as a sister and as a soldier. A week later, I stood on the parade field in my service uniform watching a fresh group of recruits struggle through their morning drills. My transfer to the training command had been approved. This was my first day out of the investigation's grind. No late-night knocks from CID, no last-minute subpoenas just shaping new soldiers. Captain Finch had signed off on the reassignment himself. You've done more than your share, he'd said. Time to put that experience to work where no one can accuse you of playing favorites. The idea of a steady schedule and no surprise harassment calls sounded like a luxury. At lunch, I took my coffee, outside my phone, buzzing with a photo from Jenna. Maya was in the backyard of their new townhouse, her wheelchair parked in the grass, arms raised in a victory pose as she fed the neighbor's golden retriever a treat. Jenna had written, "She says, this is her safe spot." I stared at the picture for a long minute before saving it to my home screen. That evening, I drove over to see them. The townhouse was small but bright, with a ramp out front and wind chimes by the door. Maya greeted me first, practically bouncing in her chair. "Want to see my room?" She gave me a full tour. Shelves stacked with books, a desk under the window, and the silver chain, now hanging from a pegboard above her bed. "So I don't lose it," she explained. Jenna joined us, leaning against the doorway. "She's been sleeping better. No nightmares." "That's what happens when you're not living in fight or flight," I said. We ended up in the kitchen sharing takeout and talking about mundane things. School schedules, Maya's new physical therapy program, the fact that Jenna was thinking about picking up part-time work again. No tense glances at the door, no scanning the street for a certain SUV. Just normal. As I was leaving, Jenna walked me out to my truck. "You know," she said, "I didn't realize how much I'd been bracing for the next bad thing until it stopped happening." "That's the part no one tells you," I said. "Justice isn't about payback. It's about safety. About not having to look over your shoulder every day." She gave me a tight hug. "You gave us that, Alina." Driving home, I thought about the last 2 months, how fast it had escalated, how ugly it had gotten, and how close it had come to breaking more than just legal lines. It struck me that in the Army, we talk about completing the mission like it's a finish line. But this wasn't a mission you could clock out of. Protecting them wasn't a one-time order. It was permanent. Back at my apartment, I dropped my cover on the counter and sat down with a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote in big block letters, "Keep them safe." Always. It wasn't policy. It wasn't military doctrine. It was just the only thing that mattered. Looking back, it's strange how something that started with a knock at my door at 2 a.m. turned into the fight of my life outside the uniform. I've dealt with hostile suspects, tense standoffs, and high-pressure missions. But nothing compares to staring down your own family when they cross the line. In the Army, we train to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Turns out that mission doesn't stop when you leave base. It just changes shape. Jenna and Maya aren't just safe now. They're free. And for me, that's the only victory that ever mattered. Thank you for hearing my story. If you've ever had to fight for your family or against them, let the world know we stand together. Just comment, "Yay," "Yes," below. Here is the message I want you to carry with you. Silence is where shame grows, but your voice is where your power begins. Healing is not a return to who you were. It is the forging of who you have become. Your deepest wounds can forge your greatest strength. Remember, you are not just a survivor. You are a warrior, and you are not alone.